also a
We're going here. Yes.
PowerPoint presentation or a PDF too.
Weird. You're getting an image on your site on.
Yeah,
Okay.
we're all live.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see your Blueberry logo up on the
Yep.
screen.
Yep. Yep.
Just to
Okay.
let you
Good.
know.
Good. Here we go.
Todd and Rob in the afternoon.
Hey, afternoon delight.
With Todd and Rob.
Oh yeah, here we are with a new media show, and Rob, the audio is fixed.
Really? Wow, that's great news. I like that.
Me too.
I like to be heard, I guess, a little bit anyway. I'm not too egotistical about it. I'm a humble guy.
and not to be heard with an echo. So
Right. Well, it's an amplification of my voice,
Yeah.
right? When it echoes, right?
Exactly. When I first set up OBS, for some reason it wasn't hearing your voice. And then something happened and it magically started working, and I had a second audio source in, and it was just milliseconds and just enough to make it sound like you had a reverb or something in it. But anyway.
Yeah. Well, some people think having a reverb is cool, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, anyway, welcome everybody, and I am fresh back from Podfest Asia. Matter of fact, my voice is a little wretched, but I met all kinds of interesting people, and I will have to say, Rob, the funniest thing, there was a session with a radio guy and they call him a sexy, what's the word? Sexy actress or something like that. They don't call them PORN stars here. They and she's really not a porn star. She's a erotica filmmaker.
That's what I was going to say. It's probably a specialized entertainer.
Well, it's soft. It's not hard.
Right.
But there is nudity and just everything else, but you don't ever see some things. Anyway,
Sure.
they have a podcast called Too Hot to Podcast, and I would recommend a subscription. The session was very uncomfortable for very conservative Filipinos that were in the group, in the attendance, but it just shows that the content here has evolved across all genres, and things are moving. There's lots of networks being formed. There's dedicated launching of shows and lots of money coming from the United States, a lot. And I didn't get the full rundown because it hadn't officially launched yet, but there's a sports network that's launching here that's covering all global sports, but is being paid for by somebody in the United States. And I guess we'll find out whenever that launches. But first year, they've put $1 million in. So that buys a lot of content here. They're going to do 16 sports shows. And the first year's budget's $1 million for 16 shows. Everything. Guest, host, not guest, but the host, and everyone's going to be paid. It's all paid content. And I just thought it was interesting that was happening. Their CPMs that they're getting here are beating U.S. CPMs. on average $35 and $45 CPMs. Programmatic about the same. And apparently, if you have a 300 to 500 listeners in your show here, you're monetized. So the standards of monetization are much, much lower to be able to find a sponsor in the Philippines. So no signs of Spotify, though. They were not here. They've had a big pullback, and while no one really wants to talk about it, a very bad taste has been left in people's mouths here over their basically extraction from any type of participation, support, underwriting. All of that has completely dissipated. So there's some bad blood there.
So they had some programs going that they've pulled out of. Sounds like.
Yeah. So it wasn't all positive, but the attendance at the event was, I would say, double. So maybe I did a head count once and came up with like 165 people. So again, there
So
was.
are we clear with the listeners and viewers what specific event we're talking about? We're talking about Podfest Asia.
Yeah, in the Philippines.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
Where in the Philippines?
it was in Manila.
specific? Manila. Okay.
Yeah, in Makati. So, and it was in the same co-working space we were in last year. And if it gets any bigger, they got to have a bigger room.
Yeah.
They've outgrown. Matter of fact, they were busting at the seams.
Yeah.
At this location. So it was good.
Based on the pictures, it looks like a terrific venue.
Yeah, it's a
It
beautiful
looks like
venue.
nice place. Yeah.
And what else? A lot of the same type of things you hear in the United States as far as topics. And there was, I think, 6 of us. That was Chris. Oh, yeah, there was probably 6 people from the U.S. that attended, but the sessions were probably 70-30 local. So not as many, we participated in panels and had sessions, but a lot of local talent were having, basically running the sessions, which was good.
Yeah. That is good. Good.
So,
Todd, I like how you're all color coordinated.
oh
So you
yeah, I've
got
got my purple water bottle.
Your purple water bottle and the kind of bluish shirt that goes with your
Yeah,
background.
and
It's
believe me,
really good.
I jumped out of bed and didn't turn the lights on in the bedroom and grabbed the first shirt that was on top of the pile. So it wasn't by design; it was pure luck. So
Yeah. It's all good though. I like it.
and at the same time, I've got other team members in Podcast Movement in Chicago.
Yeah. So what are they saying about the Evolutions event in Chicago? What's
Is
the feedback that you've had so far?
Vendor
got some
wise,
that
they
I've
said
heard.
it's been slow, very slow.
Yeah.
They couldn't really estimate the size because sessions are going on continuously.
Yeah.
They concurred no booth next year at Evolutions. They said it's not worth it, so we're not going to do another booth. We'll go to the summer event only from here on out. And maybe send a person to the event. I don't know. So I'll get more intel next week and have more of a report. But some of the same faces they seen at Los Angeles. So I thought that was interesting. That they're. Have you heard anything?
Yeah, I've heard. Actually, this came mostly off of social media, but I've heard that they've the number that's being thrown out around attendance is around 1,600. And usually, to be fair about it, usually if those numbers are being thrown around publicly, they're probably inflated by at least 10% or more.
Or more.
Yeah, right.
I
So
would, and they couldn't estimate how many people. I was trying to get a a picture of like keynotes and see how many people
Yeah.
were in the keynotes. And the two pictures I saw from keynotes did not look like 1,600.
Yeah.
But that's
I mean, that's not that far off from their summer event that they have, just the podcast movement full show. I
yeah,
think this past year was off, quite a bit. So I do think it's mostly the same people going
hmm
every show now.
yeah,
It's not a different audience, which is, I think, what they had intended with the Evolutions event, is that it was going to be a little bit of a different show.
yeah,
But as it's turned out, I think they've just turned out to be the same show. It just happens twice a year instead of once a year,
yeah,
and it's not growing.
yeah,
Would be the key takeaway, and it's probably and part of what you're feeling there too. And I felt it at the last full event was that there just aren't that many podcasters that actually go to that event. It's all kind of business
it's
people, and
industry
yeah, it's the industry folks doing deals with agents and networks
and existing
and
and existing podcasters.
yeah, if there are podcasters there, they're
Yeah,
usually probably larger ones because they can afford to go.
yeah.
So
Well,
yeah.
and the event here was held during a holiday, so they celebrate the end of Ramadan here.
Oh, okay.
And so all the businesses were basically, unless they were a U.S. supported business, they were off. So it made it great for the folks to have the ability to come and not have to miss work. So again, Podfest keeping with that ethos of trying to support creators in a time frame or
Yeah.
during my team's been in Chicago since Sunday, and the setup and everything that's going on. uh it's a whole week. It's not 3 days anymore. It's you burn a whole week with
Yeah.
travel and everything. So
Y- Yeah, I think I saw people posting on social media that they arrived on Sunday.
yeah,
Yeah. So and yeah.
and the show's Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, again, not at all supporting businesses, but not supporting independent creators.
Yeah.
Independent creators can't afford to take that many days off for work.
Yeah. Right in the middle of the week, and it's not
Right.
on
There's
any part of the
there's
weekend
no
really.
rollover into the weekend at all. Yeah.
Hmm.
There's no Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or
Yeah.
Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
So I would imagine that Dan and the team over there realize that that's what they're doing.
Oh, they know
So
that.
yeah, so it must be being done intentionally.
Well, it's
So
being done intentionally
yeah,
because of the
the industry
yeah,
need, right? Which most of the people that have full-time jobs in the industry don't really want to
they don't want
attend
to.
a
Yeah,
conference over a weekend,
yeah,
is
they
what it
don't
comes
they don't
down
want to
to.
be gone on a weekend. Exactly.
Right, right. And I mean, I get it. Makes sense. I mean, if you have a five day a week job, Monday through Friday, those are your work days, right?
So
So
it's really not even designed for creators. So
no, it's not. And
new
so I think
creators or hobbyist
I think
creators.
yeah, I think that really it explains what's happening here.
And
But
it's and it's and it's expensive. A very expensive event to go to too. So
yeah. So unless you're into advertising sales and doing deals with larger shows, if you're a hosting platform, there's probably not a lot to gain from being there.
yeah.
So, I mean, just look at like a company like Lipson or Acast or any of those platforms that have advertising focus to their network. That's not to say that you don't have some advertising. You do, but it's not. I don't think it's a primary driver of what you guys do. So, yeah.
So anyway, conference season is off and running. This is
Yep.
our second one. We went to an event called TravelCon, which was good.
Oh yeah, on the
Yeah.
in Phoenix, right?
Yeah.
O-
I think we
Or in
talked about
the
it in the last show.
yeah, yeah, we did.
It was
And
good.
so, and then soon it's going to be the podcast show.
Yep.
So that's coming
Yeah,
up.
it's right around the corner. It's about a little over a month from now.
Yeah, are you going to that?
Yeah, I leave here on May 11th, and then the following week fly to London. I got to get my airline tickets booked.
Yeah.
So
That'll be interesting to see what happens there. I'm really starting to think that that event is really the flagship event for the industry.
well, for Europe it is. People from the United States are not going to be going across the pond for it.
Well, even though I mean, I heard a lot of people from the U.S. went over there
But it's
last
the
year.
business people that are going.
Well, sure, that's
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
the larger budgets are over there.
Yeah, but we
That
had
side.
good, and I guess the word I would use is there was a fair number of new creators there, and part of it is they allow for a day pass, so people
Yeah,
can come in. Yeah,
that really helps a lot because then a person doesn't have to take a lot of time off.
yeah,
They can just fly in, go one day, and maybe spend a second day, and then head back
or
home.
take a train in, and it's
Yeah, well, that too.
It's
right.
easy. Europe is compared to the United States relatively small. You can get somewhere pretty quickly.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
but anyway, so I guess you've been excuse me, you've been researching. What is a definition of a podcast? Are we?
I just wanted to, I wanted to do an episode where we kind of see what the consensus is out there on what people think a podcast is right now. So I did some queries in Chat GPT and to Grok 3 and to Google Gemini and got some results back, and I
Aha.
think that was one of the experiments. But I wanted to before we dive into that too deeply, I wanted to mention that the Ambies Awards were just held at
Oh,
Podcast Movement a couple days ago too,
they
and
had the Ambi Awards at Podcast Movement. They kind
as part of it,
of
right?
as
It was like
part of it.
just they usually hold it like the day before
Uh,
Podcast Movement Evolutions starts, so it's a companion event,
mm-hmm.
but it's not really part of Podcast Movement
Yep.
per se, but they're the Ambies or the Podcast Academy is tapping into the attendees, right, that go to the Podcast Movement as
Yep.
their base for people going to the awards, right? So it
Mhm.
makes sense, right? But the interesting thing about the Ambies, it's seen as like it's the most kind of I guess most prominent podcast awards show out there, because it gets like Hollywood media press and coverage and stuff like that, but the tagline for the Ambies is awards for excellence in audio. So that's been that way for a few years now, but I think in the context of this discussion that I'd like to have on the show here around what is a podcast, it's an interesting kind of comparison that they have that tagline, the audio excellence in audio tagline, where your podcast awards event, Todd, is contrasting the People's Choice Podcast Awards to honor excellence in podcasting.
Yep.
So I think it's a reflection of the difference, right, in different parts of the podcast community around what they see as what this medium is. And it begs the question. I mean, you've left the door open for the awards to be potentially about the full spectrum of what podcasting could be seen as, where the Ambies are saying, well, podcasting is just audio.
Well,
So
to a point, I do require you have an RSS feed to
yeah, but
submit your
that's not,
show.
yeah, but I think you said last year that you had quite a few shows submit to you that were YouTube only programs that were
Yeah, but
tagged as podcasts, right?
they couldn't apply unless they have an RSS feed.
That's feed. So did you? So you had to drop those. Is that what you're
Well,
saying?
they never got through the application process because we don't let you submit unless you paste in your RSS feed.
Got it. Okay. Um, did you have many shows submit to you that had video RSS feeds?
There was probably a handful. Again, I'll have to go back and look.
Yeah, it's probably a small amount.
Small
I
number.
would imagine. But I think that the ambies have kind of positioned themselves
as audio.
as audio, and I know that
But did they recognize anybody that was doing video?
Well, I mean, just because the event focuses on audio doesn't exclude the fact that those audio programs could have video
Oh,
versions.
got it.
Right. So I guess it's kind of this bigger question around, well, what is a podcast, right? What's the definition of a podcast today? And I think this contrast between your event and the Ambies is a good example of where we are at. And so I did a couple of queries, just basic query in in Google, right? So Google has the AI kind of Gemini kind of built into the search queries, and so I did a specific query into what a podcast. I mean, what is a podcast? It was just a very simple question that I posed to Google and Gemini, and it came back with a result that says a podcast is essentially a digital audio program that you can download or stream from the internet, often in the form of a series or episodes. And here's the breakdown of that. Think radio show, but on demand. Unlike traditional radio, you can listen to a podcast whenever and wherever you want. A podcast series is a series of episodes focused on a particular topic. Now, audio, but it also comes up in the results says audio focused, but have video. While podcasts are primarily an audio medium, some creators also offer video versions or supplemental video content, often found in YouTube. So that's what AI says about it, right? So it's kind of, couching the conflict a little bit, right? Or the perception, right? That it's primarily audio, which I would say is true. I think podcasting is primarily audio. And so I'm not saying that it's wrong. I'm just saying that it's probably seeing what's happened in a broader scope and defining it correctly. And I think Chat GPT 4.0 came back saying a podcast is a digital audio and sometimes video show. So there's some synergies here between what Chat GPT 4.0 is saying as well as the Gemini platform. Says like radio or TV, but is distributed primarily over the internet. Listeners can stream or download episodes to listen on demand using various apps, right? And they're usually episodic on demand, typically hosted via RSS feed, is the techno format. Um, but it says, note, some platforms like Spotify are starting to bypass RSS. And so that's what Chat GPT. Now, granted, obviously, if you've used these platforms, it gives you a lot more output than I would feel comfortable just reading into the show today. But so it actually and then Grok 3 is a little bit more direct about it. Okay, it says for the same query, what is a podcast? Question mark. A podcast is a digital audio or video series that is typically distributed over the internet and can be downloaded or streamed on various devices such as a smartphone, computers, or tablets. So many say that Grok 3 is the best AI out there. Now, granted, I'm sure that there's versions of Chat GPT that are better than
I think they all are,
4.0.
Of course, everyone, as many people are hating on X right now. You know, I'm sure a lot of people would contest that Grok is the best, but I, in the end, I think prime example was there was someone that was saying that you have to have audio yesterday at Podfest Asia. I mean, you have to have video. It's just you have to.
Oh, right.
And I kind of came in before I gave my presentation, which I did on AI, and basically said, "Hey, here are some things I've heard that I will let you, based on 20 years of experience, let you think a little bit about." And
Hmm.
I asked the question, "How many of you knew that you could do video podcasts via RSS?" And not a single hand went up. Not a single hand in that whole group.
Yeah.
And so I explained then that video has been supported in podcasts since the beginning, and people were astounded.
Yeah. And
Um,
I thought it was interesting of all the output that all three of these AI platforms gave me, none of them mentioned anything about video via RSS.
right.
So, it's definitely missing from the conversation
Yes.
that's happening around the definition of a podcast. Um, and even in the Grok 3, if you read that paragraph, that first paragraph that came up on that query on Grok 3, it says a podcast is a digital audio or video series that is typically distributed over the internet. Now, granted,
Mm-hmm.
it's audio or video. It's not audio or video or both, which which I would say is probably more a reflection of where we are today. Um, I think it's three choices, I think, is what the market is actually having to grapple with right now.
So I asked a direct question: are video podcasts supported in RSS feeds? And ChatGPT said, yes, video podcasts are supported in RSS feeds. They've been part of podcasting since the early days. And then it just gives an example. Platforms that support video and RSS: Apple Podcasts, Podcast Addict, Podverse, Overcast, and Modern Podcast app, especially those in the Podcasting 2.0 ecosystem. Interesting.
Also, so Chat GPT mentioned the podcasting 2.0
Yeah,
project, huh?
yeah,
That's
yeah.
good.
I say what? So let's ask the next question. What host support video podcasting by RSS? See what they say. Blueberry top, Libsyn number 2, Podbean number 3. That's it. No. Oh, Castos. It says RSS.com allows uploading video files, and Pinecast has limited experimental support. So
Yeah,
so that's
and I
interesting.
think the Hubhopper platform out of the country of India also supports video podcasts too.
So interesting. Hosts that do not support video via RSS: Spotify for podcasters, Anchor, merged into Spotify for podcasts, Buzzsprout, Transistor, Captivate, Simplecast, that don't support video via RSS. Now Spotify supports video, but not via
As a
RSS.
direct upload,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
It's
As a
a direct upload.
matter of fact, that conversation, again, lack of awareness is sometimes an issue. The folks were not aware that Spotify overlays and
The audio,
the audio,
right?
and then your audio's demonetized. That was actually a shock to some.
Yeah,
So
yeah. So
we just have to keep educating.
yes, yeah. So I wanted to mention too that there was a new audio series. I'll have to emphasize this from the podcast called Media Roundtable. It's
Mm-hmm.
actually a podcast that's led by Dan Granger, who's the CEO of Oxford Road, who's been a guest on this podcast before. I mean, he's been with us before, but he did a three-part series basically addressing this question: what is a podcast? And really kind of the shape of that. And it's actually part of a research study that was done also, Todd. It's the white paper link that's in the document.
Okay.
And they do have some study kind of like slides, that kind of stuff that were in there. And it tries to address this what is a podcast question. I guess this survey that they did basically is data that was compiled over 4,000 Americans that came up with this. So there's a three-part series called "What is a Podcast," and so you can go listen to it. It's got a lot of familiar names, like James Cridland was in there, and even Norm Pattis from
Wow.
Podcast One was some audio was used in this three-part series. But really, they talked about really the origins of podcasting. They mentioned Adam Curry and Dave Weiner, and but they kind of glossed over some aspects of the early stages of the medium, and the big thing that they glossed over was video podcasting. So the whole series was very focused on the involvement of public radio and audio as the focus, and it was very commercial, advertising centric in its topic flow. But they came to the kind of the same conclusion that I did. If you listen to the third episode, Dan kind of pulls it back based on what he sees, and he basically gives a description of podcasting as kind of like what we were just talking about. It's a primarily audio medium that has elements of a video that are growing in their availability, and that's what the future looks like. Is that video is going to be having a stronger place in the medium, but it also the consensus was is that most of the people that were involved in this series and giving commentary were people that either came from public radio or they were people that work in the audio side of podcasting. So everything that was talked about in this series was definitely slanted towards that priority, right? And which is, I think audio is by far the largest element, even though we keep hearing, and I know that some data came out saying that Apple is still, I think James Cridland put this out too, Apple is still the biggest consumption platform for podcasts, even though there's maybe more people using what's seen as a podcast in Spotify and in YouTube, but what platform are they consuming the most podcasts in is the question.
It's interesting because I was wanted to be able to see. I wanted to see the presentations from both James and from
Oh,
uh,
Tom?
Coleman Insights and Amplify Media did something together, and
Oh, yeah.
so let me see if I can. Of course, Webster did a keynote yesterday as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, let's see if I can find the information from James if his stuff was published or not.
Let me see if
Okay, share. Yeah, let's see here. The biggest podcast in app. Okay, what is the biggest PodTrack?
Yeah,
Which
that's the
measured
one where he mentions that Apple is still the largest
still the
consumption
largest
app.
consumption app
Yeah,
via downloads and views.
right.
Oh, that's
But the
interesting.
industry is still conflating this issue of saying that plays on YouTube are counted as downloads.
Yeah, and that's not the case.
There's there's still people doing that. I think PodTrack was the one that was pointed to that was still referring to YouTube
Yeah.
plays or views as downloads. So they're trying to synergize all this stuff. And
Yeah.
I kind of get the reason why they're doing that. I mean,
Yeah, their business models are impacted. Only half of the top shows are posting video. 32.9% of the top shows aren't there.
yeah,
Interesting.
yeah, a third of them, of the big shows, are not doing any video.
Yeah, so who's doing YouTube? Posts full video episodes YouTube 130. Why is it weird? Post full video episodes YouTube 130%. Post audio only videos 50%. How do you get more than 130%? I don't get
Yeah, I
that.
wasn't sure on that either.
Yeah, it's a weird
Over
slide.
over indexing, is that what that's called?
Yeah, maybe. I thought James was going to be producing a report as well from his survey.
Yeah, I thought so too. I don't know.
Maybe
I,
his presentation is tomorrow or something.
could be. Yeah, that that certainly could be, Todd. Yeah, I guess Tom Webster's keynote yesterday also. I guess the topic that he focused on was the need for the industry to convert occasional listeners to more frequent consumers,
Hmm.
which would lead me to point to Apple, right?
Right.
um, because if we're trying to get heavier listeners, right, or listeners that are more engaged to more content,
Yeah.
I think is what he's talking about. Occasional listeners to turning into more frequent listeners or viewers. Well, I mean, what causes that to happen?
Yeah.
Is Spotify the best platform to encourage that when they're constantly teased all sorts of other types of content to go consume?
Mm.
Or is it better in a very focused app like an Apple podcast app to get people to consume more? I think that the model that works for consumption seems to point to more of an Apple model.
Yeah,
Yeah, would you tend to agree with
I
that?
think so. But
So
it's
a more specialized app.
well, I think, the whole industry is going to be, if you're smart at this point in the game, I think specialized apps for communities, I think it's going to get very narrow. I think that, if you want to grow your
Well, we've been
audience,
talking about that for years, haven't we?
yeah,
Of these kind of like
yeah.
niche genre apps.
And it's sad how they've, Apple and Android have really bastardized PWAs and
Oh
not
yeah,
made them as easy to manipulate as a regular, because it would be really easy. I could spin up 20 different niche. I could do that in a week. Category focused content. I'm
yeah.
actually going to experiment a little bit with that this quarter, and basically kind of seeing what kind of traction I can get with a couple of curated categories, and just to, because I've got these tools at Blueberry that allows us to build networks. So why not see if we can get a little bit of more traction for our podcasters within their specific categories.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'm
Yeah.
just kind of, so maybe we've got more coming from Podcast Movement.
Yeah, I'm sure we do.
I
Yeah,
thought he would be publicizing his results if he'd already released it.
yeah. I I would agree. I think isn't tomorrow like the second day? Is that right?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm just looking at the news here, and I'll email Jay and say, can I get a copy of your presentation as well to share on the show next week? Because they were talking a lot about the audio video in this study. Matter of fact, I provided some context just from our database. I don't think it's used in the study, but they were, they were looking to validate some information. But what's funny is I'm starting. I don't know if people just pick up on it and run with it. Because like as an example, I've said for years that 50% of podcasters don't make it to episode 7. Well, someone at Podfest Asia, someone said, well, it was 10. 10 was the number. And I'm kind of giggling.
Well, that would be great if it was, but I think it's actually probably lower.
It is lower. and then another percentage of people said that it was like 70-30, 70% listen, 30% watch. I'm like, well, I've said 70-30 for my personal show for years. This show's more 80-20. And so it was, I'm kind of giggle. I'm like, hey, where did they pick this up? Was this just an echo chamber of something? One person says it and it just gets rinse, wash, repeat. And
I don't know about you, but I haven't seen any studies that kind of clearly lays that out like
no,
that.
I've got it from validated data. Maybe we should do our own report at Blueberry talking
Maybe
about
you should,
that.
Todd. I mean, you're one of the 3 podcast hosts that is hosting video, so I can't imagine that there's any other platform that would be a better.
But here's the next piece of that. Then here, I'm sorry, I'm really organized today. My collar was rolled up. I had the wrong logo up for the first 15 minutes of the show, advertising Blueberry instead of New Media Show. So I'm a hot mess here. Maybe that would be something good to look at. But here's the kicker. Then, what if those video shows actually have YouTube channels? Then do I include?
Right. Well, how are you going to aggregate all that data?
How do I include that data? So.
Yeah.
Or are they? And again, we have some people that aren't on YouTube. They're on Rumble or other sites.
Yeah, it's true.
But yeah. Anyway, go ahead.
There's lots of options that creators now,
Oh yeah,
podcasters have for getting their content out and distributed. Actually, it's crazy how much.
It hasn't changed that much, but it's a reminder. And again, I'll stick with what I've said for years. I don't care where they watch or listen, as long as they watch or listen. And I know where my bread is buttered as a company. So from that regard,
It is hard to be everywhere, though.
effectively, that's like I'm not effective on YouTube. Yeah, we have some people come in and watch, but I don't get maybe 100 views on this content in YouTube. And whereas, we get 3,000-4,000 people that are, I think it's about.
I think we peaked out, Todd, with this show on my channel. I think we had one episode that we did that I think got like over 3,000 plays.
Well, that's pretty good. And you've been focusing on it. I try to do a little bit of stuff, and nowhere near to what you do. So,
but it's kind of rare though, and I think generally the topic that we cover doesn't really interest a large number of people though.
Yeah.
That's the other part of it too.
Yeah, we're not sloshing beer and swearing and cussing and
right. Well, no, I think the whole genre topic of podcasting is definitely saturated. So, podcasts about podcasting there's a lot of content out there right now.
I do see people quitting YouTube though because they can't handle the big YouTubers quitting because they can't handle the constant grind that YouTube demands, the pacing, and all the stuff that they have to do to fight the Alago. So
yeah, it is. I would say just based on what I see with it too, is that I do think that you get paid by the algorithm better if you publish more often, right? If you can get like maybe 2 to 3 episodes or 2 to 3 videos out a week or more.
Yeah.
I think the algorithm, and then get your thumbnails and your descriptions and your metadata, nailed down and done well. but increasingly, and this came up in the series too, that media roundtable series too, is that there's this kind of conflict that we're coming up against, and that's the algo, like you talked about, the algorithms, right? That that these big platforms, and YouTube is the biggest culprit right now. But I also think that TikTok and Instagram and these other platforms have the same issue, but more and more creators are creating uh, topics and content to feed the algorithm,
Oh, that's
right?
horrible.
To do what the algorithm wants,
Right.
to do what works for the algorithm, what ultimately works well for the viewer, because that's the kind of content they're looking for. Um, but it's basically making content creators kind of like empty vessels of sorts, right? That all they're doing is like you said, feeding the algorithm,
Yeah.
versus creating content based on their passions.
But there is a certain, it's been an unwritten thing. We've never, and Apple's never I don't think Apple affects shows based upon posting schedule, but there's historically known, if you're not in someone's ear every week, we know that growth rates are much slower, but I don't think you're
Right.
negatively impacted by not putting out 2 or 3 episodes. Matter of fact, within Apple Podcasts or podcast apps, you're actually almost penalized a little bit if you're doing more. Like people that do daily shows, they don't realize that they could actually be hurting themselves by doing a daily. In that, if people don't
Yeah.
listen for 3, 4, 5, miss 4 or 5 days, then they're going to run into an issue with people not being able. All of a sudden they're going to be in a catch up mode. Um, and we learned this in the early days by going to CES and recording all these interviews that he would say, "Why does it take you 2 months to get all your interviews out?" And it was because we purposely only released 3 interviews a week because we got hurt by putting out a new interview every day
Yeah.
because we
Right.
were dripping the content out and people would pick it up so it had 24, 48 hours to percolate, and then we drop another interview. Sometimes we'd go 3 days and do it during the week because we know that drop off happens on the weekend in podcasting, whereas in YouTube the content listing goes up in certain genres. So because people are sat on their couches and they're instead versus in their cars, so we dripped the content, and that's how we were able to achieve massive numbers on that content. But yet, I'd have vendors pissed off that it's
Yeah.
45
Took
days.
them. Yeah. Right. Took them a long time to get their content up. Yeah.
Yeah, but we had it ready, but we purposely couldn't drop, you know, 200 videos.
Yeah, and to dovetail off of that too, I do think that there's probably a limit, and I think it also gets back to it really gets back to the engagement level that you have with your audience too. I mean, I know that there's live shows out there that get hundreds of thousands of people listening to them
Yeah,
daily, right? Um, there are shows like that out there, and they're big. I mean, like 100, 200,000 people watching a
yep,
live video show at the same time.
yeah. So sports shows, hardcore,
Right.
hardcore, hardcore fans.
And some of those shows are audio podcasts too,
Yeah.
and they're hour long, that go out daily. And
How many does Rogan do a week?
he does 5 days a week,
My God,
and each of his episodes are between 2 and 3
3 hours.
hours,
Yeah.
right?
So
So if
if you're listening to Rogan, you're not listening to anyone else.
you're probably not, and that really tells you the level of engagement that he has. But
Yeah.
I don't know about you, Todd, but if I listen to Joe Rogan, I'm pretty selective about which episodes I
Oh yeah,
listen to.
yeah. I am too.
Because I would say that the way he does his metadata, like his titling of his episodes, doesn't really help the listener decide who to listen to.
Mm.
Because all he puts into his episode titles of his videos and his audios is the episode number and the name of the guest.
Mm.
That's it. And unless you recognize the name of
Right, right.
the guest, you wouldn't know that you might have an interest in listening to it because he doesn't put a topic
That was
in
hit.
there.
There was something that was hit upon in Rogan at Podfest Asia. They were like, remember, the Spotify was exclusive, and now he's not. He's available, and they used the word YouTube. He's now available on YouTube. Is his
Yeah.
full episodes available on YouTube?
Yeah.
Oh, they are now. And they didn't talk about the full episodes are now available outside in podcast apps too. And I'm smacking my head. I'm like, hey, don't get so focused on the shiny lure.
Yeah.
And that
Well, I
was
can't find an audio only feed for Joe Rogan in the Spotify app. It's only video.
oh, interesting.
So he's putting his audio out via RSS, via
Mm.
probably megaphone,
Yeah.
but I can't find the audio version inside of Spotify for his
Well,
show.
it's not because they've drank their own Kool-Aid and they just post the video.
But I've noticed that other properties that Spotify has, they're not doing video. So, like the Ringer
Mm.
Sports Network isn't publishing any
Well,
video.
they're smart. They've chosen not to do that because they knew that they were going to be negatively impacted revenue-wise.
Well, it's its own. I mean, the
Spotify owns Ringer? What?
yeah, the guy that founded that is actually part of the content team.
Oh. I didn't know they got
So,
bought by Spotify.
oh yeah, it was a couple of years ago.
Was it Megaphone or Spotify?
It was Spotify.
Huh.
Yeah, it's a deal like well, actually, it's even a deeper deal than even Joe Rogan.
Oh,
It's an owned network.
own network.
It's a sports platform.
Yeah, and I think too is some people there was and I just couldn't let it stand. Someone said, if you're over on Spotify, you'll be able to get monetized. And I had to step up and say, listen, that's not the case. Not everyone gets monetized on Spotify. I said, you have to understand what the qualifications for video are, and you have to be part of a network that's supported. They has an ad integration with Spotify. I said, you don't
Well, it
want to.
has pass through. You mean, right?
Well, no, they were talking about getting money from Spotify
Oh,
for
you
their
mean
audio podcasts, and I'm like, this doesn't
through
happen.
hosting?
Yeah, this
Right.
doesn't happen automatically. You have to be an echelon show, and you have to be part of a group. This just doesn't happen automatically. So there's a
Mhm.
lot of falsehoods people put out. And one of the things came from someone well known in the space. I had to go back to them later and say, hey, what you said is incorrect. And,
Yeah.
oh, I didn't know that. And I said, yeah, so, please, before you make a blanket statement like that, make sure you know exactly, what the deal is, how people actually are making money.
Yeah.
Especially on
It's a
pass-through
complicated
content.
landscape.
Yeah,
It's a complicated landscape, and a
yeah,
lot of people don't get the right impression.
yeah. People say, oh, I'm making money on XYZ. Well, great. And so if one person's making money, someone else should be making money. Well, that's not always the case because
Yeah.
there's specifics for each.
Yeah. And certain platforms have capabilities that other ones don't have.
Yeah.
So, I mean, hosting platforms.
Yeah. I talked with a ad sales rep there, and I said, hey, we've got a number of Filipino shows on Blueberry. I said, we have programmatic, and you're saying you're buying into programmatic. How come you're not buying into SoundStack? And she goes, who are they? And I'm like, all these other companies, these big names, but you didn't know SoundStack? How did you
Yeah.
not know them?
I think
And
a lot of people don't know about SoundStack though.
yeah, maybe.
it's not a household name by any means.
So I said,
And that's nothing to take away from them.
and
They're doing a terrific job, but
yeah,
it's just not a
and I,
brand that most podcasters know about.
and I said, I got X number of shows that are being monetized programmatically, and SoundStack's a provider of that. And
Yeah.
it was kind of got this shock look. I was like, oh no. So we'll make that introduction. So they obviously have some work to do to, get
Yeah,
the
I mean that's the value of podcast education
yeah.
is to help people understand the complexities of this medium because it's not like it used to be, right, Todd, where it was pretty easy to explain to people how this stuff
Well,
works.
well, it was U.S., Canada, UK
Right.
were being monetized, and anything outside of that was kind of ignored. And I'm like, well, here you've got this show, Too Hot to Podcast, that is doing numbers.
Yeah.
They should have advertisers, that want to be in those shows. Now it's maybe too hot. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe it's too hot for advertisers. But I think it's kind of funny when they say it's too hot to podcast. I didn't know that was an actual thing. But
Well, the early years of podcasting had a lot of porn in it too.
yeah, and they're not doing porn, but they're doing
Well, I mean, sexually
it's
explicit
sexually
content.
explicit content, and there's a lot
Right.
of that is out there, and there's
Yeah.
a number of very popular women's podcasts that are doing
Yeah, yeah.
doing some pretty, I guess we'll call it sexy work.
Yeah,
Not sexy work,
it's
sexy discussions. The work's the wrong
yeah,
word.
exactly.
I
Yeah.
apologize.
Or candid discussions
Yeah, very, very
about
candid discussion.
human sexuality.
Right.
Yeah. And that those type of shows are not entirely what I was referring to.
I
So
know,
when
I
I
know, I
said
know, I know.
porn podcast,
Yeah,
but
yeah, yeah.
when I say porn podcast, what I'm saying is it's people were publishing porn videos
Right.
into episodes via RSS.
Well, I
in the
guess they're
early
having some
years.
trouble with that somewhere. I think they're having some trouble with that on Spotify,
Yeah.
where they're actually
Right.
having adult content come in, or real stuff, like stuff you wouldn't want your children to see.
And I saw this back when I was working on Zune at Microsoft. So I had to filter that stuff out as much as I can because it clearly went against our
Well,
terms of service.
just as an FYI, Blueberry's good. We are all about free speech. So if you want
Right.
to come do your sexy podcast on Blueberry, please come on over. Well, we're happy to have you.
Well, and some of these podcasts were audio only, if you can just envision that.
I'm sure.
So anyway, that's where it kind of walks a fine line, right?
Yeah. What's and just as a little back fact, and this is kind of curious. During the pandemic, here in the Philippines, everything was locked down.
Yeah.
So no one was filming anything. The only thing that was being filmed that was making money and feeding families was this erotica content from within homes.
Oh,
So
okay.
that market flourished through the pandemic.
Couples type content.
Yeah,
probably.
because they could
Yeah.
continue, and it was a network of a big company that was,
Yep.
and again, it wasn't PORN, it was erotica type content. And again, there's a fine line. I guess depends on who you are and what you'll define as what. But yeah, they said that business thrived during the pandemic, where everything else just got obliterated. So kind of makes sense in that get a camera delivered to your house and some lights, and you probably can set up shop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. If
So,
you have two consenting adults that
or
are
more.
okay with that,
Yeah.
or more, right?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So the content in podcasting has spanned quite the spectrum over the years.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
From the daily download to And that wasn't a show about podcasting. I'll just say it that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But
So,
and here's the sad part. People. I don't see people going after super creative, you know, shock value content at this point. And I don't know why we haven't. Why don't we have more shock value content in podcasting? It was really like super popular in the early days.
like Jerry Springer type formats. Is that what you're talking
Well,
about?
I'm just talking about stuff that is, you know, is in the French made. Just, Tim,
Oh,
that type of stuff.
Todd, I
Why?
did notice a couple of old video podcasts have started popping up again.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I did you notice that Kevin Rose and Alex Albright have relaunched their Dignation series?
A little grayer in the tooth, are they?
Yeah, definitely both those guys are grayer. And then
Of course,
the
they
other
don't
one that
need to do
started,
anything. They're all both independently wealthy, I'm sure.
yeah, yeah, that's true, especially Kevin. Um, Also, I saw more social posts popping up about the Ask a Ninja podcast too.
Oh, that's funny.
So, well, I mean, that series was very, very entertaining. I
Yeah,
would put it in the same ballpark as the French made TV stuff.
yeah.
Right. Yeah. So, yeah. Tim got inducted in the Hall of Fame for doing that series
Yes, he
to some
did.
degree.
Tim's done a lot of stuff for the. He's one of those. He's one of those guys that just,
Keeps chugging along.
yeah, and has done a variety of things in the podcasting space, and
Tim Street is who we're talking about,
yeah, and
and
he's
he
just
now works for was it
authentic.
Authentic?
Yeah,
Yeah,
and he's just
which
one of
is
those.
part of Podtrack.
He
Right.
just does he just keeps doing his thing, and a real good guy. You know?
Well, he was a Hollywood producer, director,
Yeah.
many, many years.
Yeah, and I'll be honest with you, it's guys like him that did a lot of stuff in the podcasting space that really helped grow the medium.
Yeah.
There's a lot of people like that. So
Well, he can bring a lot of insight to folks that are interested in getting into video too.
yeah,
Again.
again, again,
Again. Right. So it's interesting, Todd, in our purview, how things have gone in cycles, right? So
yeah,
we've seen things come and we've seen things go, and then we've seen them come back again, and then we see them come back again even more. So
yeah.
that's kind of what's happening with this video discussion.
I was having a discussion with I don't remember. It was maybe it was one of the folks that were in from the United States that was at the event and talking about the cost of media delivery and where I just kind of giggled because my AWS bill has stayed about this much.
Yeah.
And the reason it stayed about this much for many, many years is the decreasing cost of bandwidth. And that if I had to pay what I was paying even 10 years ago for bandwidth, I wouldn't survive. I'd have to increase the prices of the service. And people are shocked when I talk about how hosting companies have not raised their prices literally in 20 years. And
And that's saying a lot considering what's been happening with the
well,
inflation of the
I'm
dollar.
going to
right?
tell you, there is heavy pressure. There's
Oh,
heavy
yeah.
pressure at this point.
Yeah,
And I can't
definitely
imagine
believe that.
with the increase of healthcare and everything else that goes along, at some point, we've ridden the bandwidth thing down to lower, the cost of doing this has gotten to the point now where pretty soon there might become a reckoning where we have to raise hosting prices in order to survive.
Or will bandwidth continue
No,
to drop
it
in
can't
cost.
incrementally drop. We're already as again, I'm now negotiating on what's the best word? No, I don't think it can go that much further. So let's just use an example. Let's say sub penny. So if you're negotiating for sub penny, let's say 0.003 or 0.00275 per
That's
gig,
pretty low. Right.
that's pretty low. So,
Yeah.
and in considering we started out at 10 cents.
Yeah.
So we went from 10 cents to sub penny. Now, if you go and do a renegotiation, unless you've added petabytes of new traffic, and again, you have to add petabytes to get a better deal, you might go from 0.00275 to 0.0225.
But at scale, um,
But at scale, you're still the incremental return now is the
right.
incremental reduction is again, if you have additional bandwidth,
Right.
then that makes sense. But
Well, as we move into video more on that side, does that incrementally overall raise the costs, or does it put you
well,
in a better
it
pricing
oh
pricing
yeah, right.
position?
It well before I had video on risk. You
Yeah.
just prayed that you didn't get Joe Rogan come in with video content. Because
Yeah.
that'll kill you in one
Yeah.
month. $200,000 hosting bill. You get that kind of a bill, that takes the wind out of your sails. So
Yeah.
so we were at risk in those early days. Now it's not as much. So example, this show in the early days cost 10 cents to deliver via RSS.
Hmm.
Now it's sub penny. So, but it's still sub penny, and
Yeah.
multiply that by a popular show, and you get
Right.
in some real dollars very, 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 very quickly.
Hmm.
Where the risk on audio, I get done and put this up. This will be 48, maybe probably 70 megs.
Well, if you look at what's happening with like a YouTube and a Spotify,
And YouTube put in their own fiber, so
yeah,
they
so
have
they
even
own their
yeah
own bandwidth is what it comes down to. I don't think a lot of people understand that or realize that, but they own their own fiber
yeah,
network, and they have data centers, hubs all over the
and
world.
they go to pops everywhere where they are there.
Right.
They bring in the fiber to the building, and
Right. And then make those direct connections between the source publishing
yeah.
and the streaming
So
side of
they
it, the
basically
HLS.
they have
Yeah.
plant expenditures and
Yep.
upkeep, but they pay nothing
Or scale.
for bandwidth transfer. It's in the electricity, obviously, but I
Yeah.
can't imagine what their internal when they math that out, what it actually cost. I'm sure it's like 0.00000 something per gigabit.
Well, they're probably gated only by how much fiber they have and what the capacity of the fiber is
Yeah, and and
globally.
and now fiber's gotten to the point where it's multiplexing, and they're what original fiber, and then what they're it was used to be one stream down, and that was it. Now it's multiplexed and frequencies, and the technology is
Yeah.
advanced where they're getting more bang for the buck out of that single fiber line. And when they put those fibers in, by the way, they just didn't put a single fiber down.
Oh
you
no,
know,
it's a bundle.
a
It's a
bundle.
big thick
Yeah,
cable,
yeah.
right? That
And it's
and
not
then
that big. It's like about that, but you can
well,
stuff a lot of
it's
yeah,
a bunch of those all in one big one though.
yeah, depending on
It,
where they're running. But you're right.
yeah, and I think all they had to do was boost the power of the laser that shoots through that, right?
No, they changed, they unplug it and put it in a new gear, and the new gear has new tech. It's still the same fiber.
Right.
So, but again, I think in the end here, going back to the podcast host discussion, um, at some point there'll have to be an addressal of cost. It just there's going to be no choice.
Well, that and also as platforms like yourself, like Blueberry, adds more AI technical support into the platform, that adds more value to the platform
Yeah.
and should be compensated based on the fact that your platform is replacing other services that
Right.
creators were having to pay for
Yeah.
outside of your platform too. So
Yeah.
I can see how that would map over time
It's
to
amazing how much money
increase.
creators are spending for their shows now. You know, when I ask, some people are spending upwards of $200 a month to do their show and
Yeah.
third-party tools. So,
Yeah, I think if you think about all the AI tools
yeah,
that people are using out there, especially if they're doing video, like the Opus Clips and the Descript tool and
yeah.
things like that, right? That can easily get you up to $100 a month.
So it's an interesting time in the space. It still remains challenging, for sure. And
Yeah.
it's one of the reasons we're diversifying with some new products.
So as we get back to this topic on what is a podcast, where do you see, Todd, this whole conversation about YouTube and trying to consolidate metrics? And, I think that there's an interest, and I heard this voiced in the media roundtable discussions too, around trying to bring together more of this information about audience, right? Because and one thing we haven't really talked about in this episode either is how the emphasis around individual shows or episodes is increasingly with these algorithms are becoming more important, right? So it's not so much audience that's loyal to a series, it's audience loyal to an episode. And I think as we have kind of shifted into this mentality of just being able to click play, that gives people the opportunity to just swoop in, just like what I do with Joe Rogan. I'll swoop in and I'll look at the list of names. Do I recognize any of the names? And I'll maybe watch one of those episodes,
Right.
but I don't like click into it and
But
watch
you're
every
but
episode
you are
when it comes out.
but you're subscribed to the series.
You don't have to be.
Well, I don't watch
I mean,
YouTube on
I mean, it's
anything
not
other than my TV, so it makes it hard to without having to do a manual search.
well, well, well. For one thing, it's not called a subscription anyway. I mean, unless you're subscribing to something that's paid for. But
Well, they
it's
ask
a
you to
follow,
follow.
right? It's a
Well,
follow, right?
YouTubers say follow and subscribe.
Or 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 favorite.
I think it actually
Well,
says subscribe in YouTube.
yeah. No. I was more talking about most of the podcast apps are no longer using that
Oh.
term
Yeah.
subscribe. So, and increasingly, the YouTube experts that I occasionally will tune into are telling me that the the subscriber numbers in YouTube is increasingly becoming irrelevant. It's not something that YouTube cares about.
Well, it's definitely. I hear people talking about that. It only like 40% are subscribed, and the rest of you are just watching. And please, that's the beg. Is if you've watched, please subscribe. That way, get out my subscribe numbers. So it still means
Yeah.
something because that's how they give plaques out, or actually how you can buy your plaque if you hit a plateau.
Well, it
So
is a signal of of a relationship that's built with a member of the audience, right?
yeah,
Of some sort, right? What that translates into, I know I follow lots of or subscribe to lots of shows on YouTube, and it does have a little bit of mapping to showing up in my wall
yeah.
on occasion, but I don't think I don't think YouTube is really utilizing that information
Well, I
as much
I know it helps me in
you would think.
podcasting because I tell you what, I would completely forget about shows if I had not followed them in a
Or
podcast app.
okay. No, I'm talking about YouTube.
I
I'm
know,
talking about
but
yeah,
again, it goes back to
right.
podcasting. I think it's critical. People don't just swoop into a podcast episode.
Yeah. I mean, I think yeah,
Yeah,
I,
on a podcast app. people don't just swoop in. It's not the same experience. YouTube, you may just swoop in, but on a podcast
Yeah, I
app,
think with YouTube, it's more of a almost like a bookmark is what I would call it.
yeah.
I see that also in like the Rumble platform, which is also a video centric platform.
I was having a
Is
hard.
it
Go ahead.
oh is that list that you have of shows that you're following or series that you're following is really like a shortcut area you can go to find a creator that you might want to check out what they're doing right now.
I had a gal that was wanted to subscribe to this show because I mentioned it, and she had Spotify open, and I couldn't get this show to come up in search on her phone.
In Spotify.
Yeah, so I said, well, we'll just put it on your Apple Podcast app, and she goes, "What's that?" And I'm like, "Oh," I said, so she had an iPhone, and I just wrote in podcast, and it popped up, and I clicked on it, and she goes, "I didn't even know that was there." And I said, "Well, it's the same thing as Spotify, except now you will not miss an episode. You are subscribed."
And you
And
can watch the video version
yeah,
too
yeah.
in Apple, but you can't in Spotify.
So and it just frustrated me because I was, I searched for this show 3 or 4 different ways and could not find it on Spotify. So all kinds of other stuff came up. So
Are we being blackballed, Todd?
maybe. Wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah, we haven't towed the company line. Is that what you're?
Not surprised.
Yeah.
So I think
But,
in the end, it's again. So she says, "Oh, just I'll start subscribing to podcasts here." I said, "That's what I would recommend."
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just, I don't really think that the definition of what a podcast is in my mind has changed at all. I think that the definition of what a podcast is in the mind of someone that's only been utilizing or creating content for the last 2 years may have a perception that things have changed.
I think the general public just doesn't give a shit.
Well, that's true too. I think that,
We
but the
just
audiences
yeah,
don't really care about how it's
They don't
distributed.
care.
They don't care about
no.
what we call it really.
Yeah,
It's just
they
a
don't
way
care.
for us.
That
You know-
ship has sailed more than a couple of years ago.
But it keeps coming up. People keep saying, we're going to solve all of our problems by changing the name.
Yeah. Good luck. What this comes up less than every 12 months now.
Right.
And
Mm.
you're not going to, and RSS is not going away. When Apple changes it so that you can't get your podcast via RSS, then I become worried.
Yeah.
Until that date.
So,
But I will say the Apple Podcast auto submission has become very popular.
I would imagine.
Yeah, they did a good job there. Because I can now see all the submissions that go. We get a notification.
Yeah, because we went through a period of time when people just didn't submit their shows to
Yeah,
Apple.
yeah.
They got in there, they created a podcast, and
Yep.
they immediately got it pushed over to Spotify.
Because
or-
Spotify made it easy to one-click submit.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
And plus a lot of people, as you recall, were all spun up about being in Spotify anyway,
Yeah. Oh,
especially
my God.
younger people.
Jesus, they
Um,
a feeding frenzy on that.
Yeah, it was a feeding frenzy, and Apple was always like, "Oh my God, how do I do that? How do I get it into Apple?" And some people didn't even know that they could.
And little did we know Spotify was paying people overseas to submit shows for them. They had people in call and work centers over foreign countries doing the submissions to Apple manually. We didn't even know it. That was their secret sauce. They didn't have an API integration. They just manpowered it. Can you
Well,
imagine?
that's how, I mean, for a long time, Spotify submitted shows into Apple through was it the Anchor Apple ID or something
Well,
like that, right?
it was Anchor employees submitting the shows,
For
overseas
shows.
employees. Yeah, so they were, we automatically got into Apple Podcasts. How come you couldn't do that? Well, I didn't have 50 people in a work center somewhere in Bangladesh that was submitting shows to Apple.
Yeah. Well, supposedly, per the Apple terms of service, as you recall, didn't allow them to do that.
Well, they did, and
I know they did,
why
and I got
Apple
the impression that Apple didn't shut it down
and
either.
why Apple didn't shut it down is still a mystery to me, Ted.
For for years, they did that. And
If I
Todd, here we both are over here filling out spreadsheets
right,
to send to Spotify to
yeah,
add to their catalog. Right,
yeah, and doing the work for them,
right.
and being their tech support. Man, we were so stupid.
Well, we were getting screamed at by
Yeah,
podcasters.
that's true.
Get
We're
me an
getting
Apple, get me an Apple,
absolutely
or
screamed at.
or get me into. Well, they were saying get me an Apple too, but they were saying get me in Spotify.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have a request. If any of you have a Elgato Facecam Pro,
Are you still struggling with that?
it doesn't work. So I bought another camera.
Oh wow.
I bought a Logitech. No one could answer the question. We never could get it. I never could get it to work. I'll just say, don't. If you have a MacBook Pro, do not buy an Elgato Facecam Pro.
Hmm.
Don't
So you
work.
couldn't get a cable that would adapt to it?
Oh, I had the
Is that the
cables.
problem?
It just said this is not USB 3.
It doesn't recognize it.
Doesn't on the Mac. The Mac would not recognize. I've got everything else in the brother hooked up here. I've got
Yeah.
Stream Deck. I got the switcher. I've got my two cameras. And with everything disconnected, that camera would not work
Huh.
with the provided cables to go to a Mac. And so, yeah, so I got another new webcam that I bought.
What'd you get?
What was readily available here? The Logitech Brio
Oh, the
500.
Brio. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's a good camera.
good camera, and it works.
So is it a
And
4K? Is it 4K
it's
capable?
no, it's only 1080.
1080.
Yeah, and I need it to work with my teleprompter because that's why I primarily needed it for. I'm just using the face camera here today on the Mac. I'm not using, but in order to look into my teleprompter, which is up there, I can't. It
Yeah.
just looks weird. So
Yeah.
it is what it is.
It is. It is. So, yeah. So, what's your definition now of a podcast as it contrasts with what you're hearing, what other people are thinking?
I don't want to be the dude that says it has to have an RSS feed, but I sure wish it would. I guess I'll just put it that way. My goal is to make sure that every podcast, video or audio, has an RSS feed and can be distributed via RSS. That's my goal. It's not going to happen. We made some headway with Vid2Pod and being able to give YouTubers ability to quickly and automatically have a podcast. But
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess I don't want to get stuck into defining it at this moment. What do you want to do? What's your thought?
I don't know. I guess my position on it's been consistent over many years is that video has always been part of the podcast space.
Yep.
I mean, if you think back, Todd, back
Look at
when I
this
worked
show.
on at Zune, right?
Yeah.
Zune had big screens on their portable media players,
Yep.
and I built a video podcast experience inside a Windows Media Center, and I've got the Zune to prove it. It's a small device with a big screen.
Yep.
and I would play all sorts of video podcasts. If you think about it, all the major media companies supported video podcasting
Yeah.
back in the early days.
Yep. Because there
And
was no YouTube.
yeah, that was for a few years prior to the existence of YouTube. And then
Yep.
when YouTube launched,
They moved.
well, some of them did,
And some of them quit.
or they just they just moved completely over there. Um, but others continued,
Yeah.
like Leo Laporte. Continue. I mean, like on my Zune here.
Oh, it booted up.
Oh yeah, it still works, and I can throttle back and forth between audio and video. So those are all the video podcasts,
Ah.
and then I just tap a little icon, and that's all the audio shows.
Does it actually still work?
Yeah, I can play. I'll play an Apple keynote from 2016.
Oh, I'm talking about current content.
Oh, yeah, I don't keep the content
Oh, okay.
updated in this thing.
So it's playing video just fine.
Yeah, that's Tim Cook
Yeah.
on stage there back in 2016
Via RSS.
via RSS. That's when they put out the Apple keynote every year into an RSS feed. Yeah, I used to feature it, even though I work for Microsoft. And then and here's your podcast on the Zune, Todd.
Oh my God.
This one was talking about the TriCaster back in 2016 as well. I guess that was the last time I updated it.
Oh yeah.
So-
Wow. That's when I still had hair. I was in Hawaii, and oh yeah.
Yeah.
Look at those fantastic graphics there. Oh my God.
Yeah,
Yeah, that was
That
good. That was definitely CES something.
That- that was something else back then.
Yeah.
And
Just look at
but
us
yeah,
now.
this is the back of this has a tombstone on it.
Oh, does it? You had that laser down there.
Well, actually, this was the last run of the Zune HD.
Oh, really? And they put
And so
they put a
all of the
tombstone on it.
employees, right, that were still working
Yeah.
on Zune back in, I think they gave this to me in 2011.
That's
I
funny.
think. And it says RIP Zune,
Rip Zune.
2006 to 2011.
I don't know if I still own the domain. Let me look. I used to own
Oh.
ZunePodcast.com.
And here's an old new media show too.
No,
from
I don't have it no more. I let it expire. But I had ZunePodcast.com for years.
Looks like
Oh yeah. Yep, that
Dan Franks was on the show back then.
oh that's funny. Yeah, that goes back a ways. I still have some of those shirts.
Yeah. So, yeah,
Yeah,
that just gives you a little bit of glimpse of how long we've been doing this stuff.
just like my CNN podcast. I had CNN podcast, Cochrane News Network.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cochrane News
CNN
Network.
podcast. Let's see if they even have that still. Do they have that redirecting? Let me look. See, they beat me up, and now they don't even use it. So CNNpodcast.com doesn't even go anywhere.
Oh, it doesn't.
No, they probably don't even remember they own it, or they let it expire. That would be the even more funny thing.
Yeah.
Let's see if they let it expire after they threaten me with life and limb. Oh, that's funny. I can broker to buy it.
Oh, you can.
Yeah, well, it's still
So-
it's still registered.
So you can see a bunch of podcast
Yeah.
tiles there.
Yeah. So, for, again, this audience, if nothing else, knows that podcasts are available via video. Question is, are you going to start doing it? And if you're not going to start doing it, why not? Why haven't you? That's the question I want answered. Those of you doing video, why would you not want to be found everywhere and anywhere, including, off the belly of the beast? Why would you not want to have your video podcasts to be available everywhere through open RSS? I guess maybe that's the question I'm going to start asking. Why
Yeah.
not have that as a backup plan? So when you get deplatformed or whatever may happen.
Yeah, that's why I started talking about this concept of trying to support HLS streaming
Well, that
more.
turned into a can of worms. It is expensive. I just don't think we could afford to do it. It's just we I looked at the cost and it's incredibly high.
Yeah, I talked to Rocky from Soundstack, and she said it's not that expensive to do.
Okay, if you're doing audio,
No, no, no.
they
What are you
don't
talking
do
about?
video. They don't do video.
No, no. The infrastructure of being able to do it
Oh,
isn't that
but
expensive.
but it, well, if you do it on AWS, it is expensive. Yeah, we priced it. Let me bring it up. We're almost out of time here.
Well, that's why you
Uh,
have to build it on your own infrastructure and use
Yeah,
CDN.
well, then how do you scale that? That then you run into scaling issues. Let's see here. Let me find the discussion. Yeah, here it is. Yeah, so anyway, we linked to it, and I was just like, no, we're not doing this because it would be thousands and thousands. This show alone to do on HLS was more than $100 a month. Just this
Mhm.
show to stream on HLS through a third party provider.
In video.
Yeah. Yeah, it was more than 100 a month. So that's why I quit doing it. So, all right.
So it's now doing it via audio only. Is that what you're
Well,
doing?
I'm just doing Shoutcast.
Oh, you're doing Shoutcast.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's what's supported in the podcasting apps. And that costs nearly
well,
nothing.
yeah. I
At
think that
20 bucks a month or something.
Shoutcast is how I started streaming my
Still
radio show.
alive and well.
Yep.
Still alive and well.
It was owned by America Online for many years.
Yep.
And then Yahoo owned it. And I think, was it
I think it's
Shoutcast?
I think it's open source now.
Yeah.
I think you can, spinning up Shoutcast servers are easy and cheap, very, very cheap because it's audio bandwidth. There's hardly no bandwidth to it. And it was a little expensive for you in those early days because bandwidth was high, but now bandwidth is nothing. I think the Shoutcast stream I have right now supports 5,000 people on it. And there's never going to be 5,000 on it. There might be 20. And I do an on-demand service. So when the show gets done, I stop it, and then there's programming that's in a loop.
Yeah, I would do it just, I had my own encoder on my
Yeah.
own computer.
Yeah,
When I
on your
first started doing
well,
all this
that's
stuff,
what I'm here too.
I had a desktop under an office under an office desk in an office in Tacoma, Washington.
And that's where it ran, right?
That's where, yeah, that's where it streamed it. I initiated the stream from my home
Yeah.
to that box, and it would stream it out of my.
Oh, so they were pulling it from that box or from that laptop or
Well,
whatever.
yeah, it was getting sent out through that laptop. I
Oh.
was playing the content through the encoder into that,
Okay.
and then that was putting it out there off of a URL.
That's funny.
So it could be played out there.
Yeah.
But that's how I got started in streaming, and then I got
Then you put some computers in a rack.
yeah, I got some servers and got Windows Media servers. I got some free software from Microsoft, the operating system. I think it was Windows Windows Server 2000. I think is what it was, and ran the Windows Media Server service on that. And so I was able to stream, and then I also got the Real Networks
Right.
Streaming servers as well, and I just ran those on Windows machines.
You just paid for your bandwidth then from usage.
Yeah, I had to
your
get
server
like
cost.
I had like 4 rack servers, in one co-location facility. One was serving a website, and then two of the other ones
We're doing the
were
streams.
were doing Windows streams and then real network streams, and then another one was kind of like a backup.
Well, I've got a
So
little laptop sitting over here, Rob, that's just running
yeah,
a single app. And matter of fact, I've got a Mac Mini here now, so I'm going to just put it on that here soon. I need to find a different
yeah, yeah. And
streaming
as you
service.
recall, that's the only way you could do it back then
Yeah,
because there
that was
weren't
it.
any service providers that could
No,
do any of this stuff.
none.
So if you wanted to get started in the time frame we got started in, it
Yeah.
was technically a little more challenging than it is now.
No, you had to geek out. That's for sure. Okay, we're at the end here. Todd
We are.
at blueberry.com or geeknews@gmail.com. I'm at Geek News on X. Oh, I had someone say they're not registering for the podcast awards because I still communicate through X.
Really?
Yeah. I'm not registering because you still are on X. I'm like, okay. Anyway, at Geek News on X, at Geek News at geeknews.chat on Mastodon. So
Yeah. So Todd, I guess it's not correct now to ever wear a red hat. I guess is what I keep hearing.
well, you can't wear a Tesla hat either, right? So
Are there Tesla hats? Yeah, I've
I
never
know,
worn a Tesla
well,
hat.
yeah, you might get keyed.
Well, they're upgrading that Sentry mode capability in those cars, where where they're going to initiate playing loud music if a person gets too close to the vehicle.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yep, and so it's activated automatically in my car now when I park.
Yeah, you should. It should be an announcement. You are being recorded. It just
Well,
amazes me that people haven't realized they're being recorded, and they're
yeah,
still doing
the
this.
the newer Teslas, I think, have 9 cameras on them. So you're not going to get away with it.
My
That's for
car,
sure.
my car has aftermarket cameras in it, front and back, that record.
Yeah, right. So it's just people are
It's
not.
motion activated, so when someone gets close, it starts recording.
Yeah. Well,
So
this will actually send me a message. It has the ability. There's external speakers on that car,
wow.
so it'll play loud music, or I mean, the car is capable of farting.
Well,
So
farting. Yeah, you should have. You are being monitored.
well, my external Ring cameras that I have on my house, I've got 4 of them on my house, and each one of them has a setting in the app that you can set to, and the cameras will actually voice an audio
Yeah,
warning
yeah.
to a person, you're being recorded.
I have Wise cameras, and
Yeah,
so
yeah,
when I leave here, the only thing it's running is the router and the refrigerator and 2 cameras, and
yeah,
they point towards the entrances, and same thing. And that
yeah.
actually, they freaked out. They came in to clean the air conditioning unit or something, and didn't let me know in advance because I could have turned the warning off. It says you're being recorded. You're being recorded. And I guess that went on for like 35 minutes, and they were pretty unnerved about you're being recorded. You're being recorded.
Right. It's just
and,
annoying as
matter
hell.
of fact, my phone's
Yeah.
ding, 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 ding. I wake up. I'm like, what the hell's going on? I turned the camera on. I turned the speaker on. I said, I'm sorry. I had it, set up to send a warning. A little overkill
I wouldn't be
here.
surprised if Elon, or the software developers, whoever comes up with this upgrade to the Sentry mode, will actually cause the horn to go off too and the lights to flash.
Oh, that would be good.
Would be-
Yeah.
yeah,
A lot of the
scare
security
the shit
systems,
out of people.
a lot of
Right.
security systems on people's vehicles do that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
there's lots of
If you
very
bump them or something like
yeah,
that,
yeah. They will, and they'll give a verbal warning as you're getting too close.
yeah.
And a
That's-
very loud speaker.
Yeah, I've got a big USB stick in my glove box
Oh, it
that
records
actually,
too.
it stores all the videos.
Oh, that's interesting. Hmm. That doesn't go over
Yep.
the cloud now. It just goes to the stick. You shouldn't tell people that. They'll be busting the windows out and taking the stick out.
Well, it's common knowledge. It's not hard to find that
Okay.
information, but
Well, I don't think some of these folks that are doing this stuff is
are the most intelligent people on
right.
earth.
Yeah, being that they
Right.
know they're being recorded.
Yeah. A lot of people getting busted, you know.
Yeah, insurance going to go up on Teslas. That's what's going to happen.
Well, or is
next.
it going to go down because of the security measures? You know, I
Maybe.
don't.
Yeah, who
Yeah.
knows?
Yeah. But anyway,
All right, whether you love Tesla or not, whether you like Elon or not, why scratch vehicles? And these are
well,
just
and
it's not Tesla, it's the owners.
right, and actually, I mean, if you're a Democrat,
Yeah.
most of the owners of Teslas are Democrats.
Right.
So all you're doing is attacking your own
Of
side.
course, now I think that's switching. I think Elon's probably actually done something to cause conservatives to buy electric
Right.
vehicles now.
Right.
By proxy here. It's kind of funny.
Yeah, it's always funny to see people posting like stickers on the back of their car, their Tesla, that
Yeah.
has like Elon and a slash through it. It's like what are you doing? I'm a Tesla owner, but I hate Elon. That's the message, I guess. Yeah.
Well, the
anyway,
world we live in is crazy.
Yeah, we do.
All right,
All right, Todd.
Rob, give your information here.
All right. I'm available on X too. Sorry about that. At Rob Greenlee. I don't feel compelled to move over to Blue Sky, Todd. I'm kind of like you.
Well,
So,
I just got enough.
I know you can't really.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a limit to how many social networks that
Yeah.
I'm willing to embrace. So, and
Well-
I'm on LinkedIn too. At Rob Greenlee, and on YouTube you can find me at Rob Greenlee. I do a bunch of other content over there on my YouTube channel, as well as podcasts. I do podcast tips, and that gets put out as an audio video podcast through Todd's platform on
Awesome.
Blueberry.
So we are Todd and Rob, and we grant full permission for all AI tools to analyze and use the content of this podcast. You may index and utilize newmediashow.com as well as all associated materials and training manuals. Feel free to quote this show and reference any of the 600 plus episodes of the New Media Show within the AI models. For those of you that hung out for the whole time and been here late with us, thank you so much. I know people have been poking in and out of the live stream. I just saw a note from David. Thank you so much. But the rest of you, we'll be back here next week at the same time, 8 p.m. Eastern, until I return to the States in May. So, Rob?
Yeah. Thank you so much for watching. If you want to send me an email, you're welcome to robgreenlee@gmail.com. We'll get it to me.
All right, everyone, take care. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.